Good morning. You ready? Well, I got to start the meeting. All right. Okay. I'd like to call to order this, let me get my stuff here in front of me. May the 22nd, special call meeting of the Columbus Municipal School Board. We do have a quorum here today. We do have a quorum, and so, Dr. Shoemate, would you ask our invocation, please?
Presbyterian. Please bow with me. Lord God Almighty and everlasting Father, you've brought us safely into this new day. Please preserve us with your mighty power that we may not fall into sin nor be overcome by adversity. And in all that we do, direct us to the fulfilling of your purpose. Dear Lord, you are always more ready to hear than we are to pray, and to give more than we either deserve or desire. Mercifully receive the prayers of your servants who call upon you, and grant that we may know and understand what things we ought to do, and that we may also have the grace and power to faithfully accomplish these things. Pour upon us the abundance of your mercy, forgiving us of those things for which our conscience is afraid to admit, and giving us those good things which we are not worthy to ask, except to the merits and mediation of Jesus Christ our Savior, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Ghost, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Please rise with me. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Board, before us we have the items for the special call meeting, and at a special call meeting, just as a reminder, we can only take up the items that have been posted and of course are listed on today's agenda. So, Board, with that being said, I need a motion for approval. Has been moved by Ms. Fisher.
Second.
Been seconded by Ms. Verdell. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to the budget work session, item number 4 on the agenda, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hickman.
All right, Ms. Holmes, if you can please present.
Mr. President, Dr. Hickman, members of the Board of Trustees, one of the main things we'll focus on this morning is going to be our ad valorem request, which has been provided to you. First, I would like to begin with the draft version of the 2017-2018 ad valorem tax request worksheet, and I will briefly review this worksheet with you along with the supporting documentation as to where we stand now with our total ad valorem request for the FY18 budget year. We'll begin with the very first part of the ad valorem request, which is the base calculation. We did do a 3-year look back at the base and compared the total collections for 13-14, 14-15, and 15-16 fiscal years. That is the period October 1 through September 30th of those fiscal years. And for those fiscal years that we reviewed, the total base that we calculated for the ad valorem request is $10.5 million approximately. You'll see how we calculated that number and provided it for the base. The next thing we added was the homestead exemption reimbursement that we received in 16-17, which was $327,000 approximately. There is no escrow that the district predicts or will have after we've recomputed the base for the 16-17 year. The escrow, we actually asked for $12,000, approximately less than what we could have asked for in our request that we submitted last August to the levying authority. So there is no escrow at this time. So the total base is $10,876,423. The district is asked for no increase in that base, so there's a 0% increase that has been requested. And you'll notice that on the new programs or the local contributions that we can request from the local taxpayers, you'll see that Columbus has a negative $155,902 that has been provided to us as what we could ask for in local contributions. Because that number is negative, we cannot add anything or subtract anything from the base. So that becomes 0 on our request form. So there is no new programs and no increase that the superintendent has the ability and right to ask for. At this time, I have not received any late information on the new property from Mr. Andrews' office. We're still working together to get that information. So in conservative effort, we have excluded that from the base at this time. But the worksheet will be updated once we receive that information from his office. But at this time, the base will remain the $10.8 million approximately that you see at the, for the net operations. For the debt service, you've been provided a worksheet that outlines the needs for the debt as far as the principal and interest and any paying agent fees that will be assessed in the new fiscal year or that we have remaining. We've taken the beginning cash balance at April 30th, and we've dropped in those figures and calculated what we would need to request in order to properly pay those debts when those payments become due. So the total adjusted...
Matt, would you point out what page you're referencing?
I'm sorry. It's the printed page will say page number 89 from the board book. It would say page 89. It should be the third page from the back that I've provided to you.
It's the 5th page.
Yes, it should be the orange and blue, orange and green
This one right here,
spreadsheet.
page 89. Yeah, this one. And so if you would you go through that page just so that you can point out to everyone?
Yes, sir. Okay. On all of the debt, you have all of the debt listed here, the GO bonds, 3 mil notes, QZAB, and QSCAP debts. The current cash balance, you'll see at April the 30th, there's $32,573 approximately in the GO bond fund account. We do expect an anticipated $70,000 more plus to hit by June 30th, which gives us a cash expected balance of $104,611. With the 3 mil note right now, as of April the 30th, that account is showing a negative $203,000. We do have a $188,000 EEF pledge that we will post in revenues for that 3 mil note, and we expect to receive about $12,500 in more revenues by June 30th, which will bring the total available balance down to approximately a negative $2,500. The QZAB, we have $348,655.55 in the cash account as of April the 30th for that QZAB bond. We do expect about $70 more in revenues, which will bring our total available to pay debt for the QZAB of $348,725.35. For the QSCAB, we have a cash balance at April the 30th of $152,910.10. We do not expect any more revenues for the QSCAB at this time. So that is the expected total available cash that we will have at June 30th. We do have some remaining payments. If you look in the green section, there are some remaining payments or to agents and or for principal and interest that must be paid on several of the bonds described. We have a $1,500 outstanding payment to the paying agent on the GO bond that must be paid by June 30th. We also have principal, or I should say principal towards the sinking fund for the QZAB that's going to be due of $229,000. And for the Q scab, $15,000 or more dollars. We've already paid $30,000 on the Q scab in the last semester or in the fall, but there is an additional $15,000 that will be coming due by June 30th. So we do have a total of $244,000 for the bottom section and $1,500 for the GO bonds. So you'll see that for the total for FY18 that we would need to request to cover any debts or remaining payments is $1.9 million there, and then $1 million in 3 mil note, QZAB, and QSCAB. We bring that total due down to the very bottom, the orange section. And what we have available is the top section, is the white section. And that gives us the difference in what we need to fund the debt. And then if you move over, the adjusted amount to request is the very last column in the orange section. And those numbers now flow back to the front page of the 17-18 ad valorem tax request worksheet.
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome, sir. And so that tells us what we need to request to pay for the necessary payments on the ad valorem request worksheet. So as of, at this moment, we're requesting $13,158,417, with the understanding that this could possibly change once we receive the new property estimates from Mr. Andrews' office. But at this time, this is where our ad valorem request stands.
And one other thing is, when you receive those numbers from Mr. Andrews' office, they will go up, not down, correct?
The new property, if we choose to put it in the worksheet, yes, sir, it would increase.
Okay, and so help me understand, and I'm just asking, board chime in at any point just so that we cover page by page thoroughly. Help me understand why you would not put it in. I'm not saying, I'm not saying that you should or should not. I'm just asking as to why you would make the decision not to put it in if it comes back and there's value to install. Would that, is it just
Well,
because
the only thing,
the base goes up and so that's more
if the-
collections?
once he gives me the new property value, if that value is going to put us over the, once we add it into the worksheet,
Right.
if it puts us above that limitation, that statutory limitation of 55 mills, then we have to back off of it or take it out altogether. Just depends on the effect of
Sure.
it. Yes, sir. That would be the only
You
reason not
understand
to
that, Ms.
include some
Shoemake?
of it.
Okay. We get, right, right. Okay, so thank you for doing that. Okay.
And with the ad valorem request, this amount of money will be a part of the revenue or the publication that the public will see coming up in the next few weeks. This goes into a fund matrix. We include all of those revenues as a part of that announcement, and then we will update these numbers if if we're provided more accurate numbers from Mr. Andrews' office before we run that ad. But we're fastly approaching the time to run that ad.
And just for a point of clarification, we make the dollar request, and we can reference how a mill produced this past year and the year before and the year before. And so it's only after that Mr. Andrews goes through his analysis that he will come back and state a mill for the school district's property will produce X. And so then it would show us as to whether or not we are actually having to go up or whether we're flatline or maybe property's appreciated so much that we go down. Is that the way it works?
That's my understanding of it.
Okay.
If we were to use last year's millage value, we're probably looking at about a 3 to 4 mil increase.
Right.
If we were to use last year's numbers.
What we based
But
our
we
budget,
don't have that.
But what I'm saying is what we based our budget off of or the actual production of the mill.
What we based our request off last
But that
year.
is different from what it actually
Could
produced.
possibly be, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mhm.
That's correct.
It was, what we based our budget off of was
It
less.
was 200.
Right, was less than what it actually produced. Okay. I'm just trying to keep things simple. As you're doing a great job, but, okay.
But as Mr. Spears just asked, we don't have a choice to choose which one, right? We only choose the value that we asked for, not the value that it was actually the worth of the actual meal, which was more.
We have, I hear your question. So I think what it is that there is flexibility. Mr. Andrews goes through his calculations, and he comes back and he states to us, or actually in July, he sends a letter out to you and everyone else, basically saying is that this is the property and this is how we come up with, and this is my anticipated production per meal. And then he says, as an abundance of caution, you should base your budget off of, like we've used 204, 198, whatever it is. But there's the difference between what it produces and what we base our budget off of. And as we have seen historically, we've hit somewhere in the middle. And it may not be his upper limit as to what it produces, because that's just the final number. But what we base our budget off of, there's the spread there. So as you kind of look at things in setting your budget, you look at it and say, okay, well, historically, this is what X, Y, and Z lead up to. And it gives you some small flexibility as to how you come to your calculation.
Oh, yeah, no, I do understand that, because the reason why we go into the middle, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, is because in the past, when we actually hit at where we thought the true millage was, that's where the shortfall happens. And so we will ask for less, like you said, to offer that cushion. We will never want to offer what, you know, the what we actually think it's going to be.
Right.
Okay.
And so when we come in, when the numbers are trued up, it means that we have actually based our budget on a meal value that was less than what it actually produced. And so then is this when we go into what we call the escrow, the amount that is over?
Well, we would have excess in what we requested,
Right.
but we have to actually go through the true escrow calculation to determine that, because there is an allowable amount, because we have to recompute the base to determine the allowable amount based on whether or not we've properly run the ad. And so what we actually see in collections is then compared to what we could have asked for.
Right.
That will determine how much we truly will escrow.
And so any amount, when the value is trued up for the meal, that the difference is a carryover, and I may not be using the right
Correct.
terminology, for
It's
the
a
next
carryover.
budget
Yes, ma'am.
year. Okay. Thank
And that's a good point. And that amount is, if we base it off of X and then it exceeds 4% when the base is trued up, that difference above that 4% is what you have to go back and account for. Is that correct?
It's actually actually you account for the entire amount. We look at
Right.
the entire request, and we recompute the base all over again, because of course, you know, as you've said, it will change from when we request.
Right.
And then we compare it to the actual collections from the whole. It'll be a holistic review of it, and then we would we will determine the escrow then at that time.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
And one of the things I do want to also ask the board for is a good timeline for you guys, because I wanted to see what dates would be good for you guys as far as meeting those budget deadlines that we have set. The first ad, with Dr. Hickman's permission and the board's permission, to run June the 2nd, which is a Friday. It will run June the 2nd, June the 9th, June the 16th, and possibly have our hearing that following week, and then having the board approve the budget the 29th or the 30th of June. And I was just wondering if those timelines worked well for the board. And we'll continue to provide drafts and submit those out to you, however you want to do it. But that's the proposed timeline that I would like to propose to the board and Dr. Hickman at this time.
Could you run those dates again, please?
Yes, ma'am. The actual publication, the required statutory publications for our budget hearing will be June the 2nd, June the 9th, June the 16th, with the possible public hearing that following Thursday, and then the board approving the budget on the 29th of June. I didn't know if those dates and timelines would work for everyone.
So the Thursday that you're talking about is June the 22nd?
Yes, ma'am, for the public hearing.
I mean, I see no harm in
Yeah,
it.
that date works for me.
I mean,
Yeah.
so as far as June the 22nd, we're talking about that being our budget hearing, the public hearing, and so we can do that that afternoon? Okay.
Well, I would prefer around 11-ish, 1-ish, maybe, during the day. Possible.
Well, I mean, if we're trying to get public in here, I mean, I think since we're having this in the morning, I know it's a work session, it's not the formal hearing and different things. I mean, I was thinking we have this one, and we've made the announcement of us having this, and then we'd have one in the evening. But, I mean,
The
I mean,
public hearing,
no, it's on
No,
Thursday,
this
the
is on Thursday.
22nd. So, I mean, I was thinking that we would have it in the afternoon, because that gives more people the opportunity to attend.
Mhm.
I mean, it is a public hearing. So, I mean, if we could say 5:30?
Dr. Hickman, do we have any of these scheduled for the business sector as it was done last year?
I know we talked about it with the committee. We wanted to, and we talked with Joe Max about doing the same thing. But it's not on the books, no, if that's the answer to your question. And can we may need to make that tentative for me, because I know that at Metis, I just don't know which day that I have to be down there to present for the state.
Okay, make it
I'm trying to
tentative.
find it.
Make the time or make the day?
The day, or I mean, if you guys can do it without me, but I wanted to be there, but.
Well, no.
No, no,
Right.
no, no, no.
Right.
No, no,
What are
no.
you talking about?
You guys can take all the
What are you
darts.
talking about?
That's what we're here for, each other.
All right, so we're gonna put it down, and we've still got a month out that we can fine tune things, but I think as far as what the board is saying, we've agreed that that day and time is good, and we can obviously, we have 2 meetings scheduled, our review session, and we have our regular meeting, that if we find out more details as we're approaching that we can take up. Is that okay, board?
No.
Okay.
And also, I'd like to ask if there is
Business.
another presentation schedule,
Mhm.
if we could be informed so that we can
Yes.
try to attend. Thank you.
Okay. So does that answer your question, Ms. Holmes? Okay. All right. All right. All right, so now we go to, what's your next part, Ms. Holmes? That concludes your presentation?
I didn't want to belabor the point of going through the combined and combining budgets, because the combined and combining are still work in progress at
Sure.
this time, so those numbers will drastically change
Okay.
here in the next week or two, so it would be a moot point at this point. But I did want to give the board a representation of what the numbers look like at this point. There is one more thing I would like to add, that in order to mitigate, of course, you know about the reduction in MAP, we are working diligently to try to find ways to shore up that deficit that we will see. And one of the things that we've been tackling is the vacancies, determining which positions we can forego without adversely affecting the instructional needs of the kids. So at this point, to date, we are at about 16 closures in vacancies. We do expect more as we continue to work through the budget process. We will keep you informed of the final count of those vacancies that have been closed that will help mitigate that deficit. So we're working diligently trying to shore that up.
All right. Well, board, I know that she concluded that part, but I have some questions. Certainly, if y'all have questions about what she's presented, or other questions regarding reductions and things that you've covered, if you don't mind, the topics you've been going over month after month that we've talked about, pretty extensively. So before I ask any questions, does anyone want to start?
I
Ms.
have
Riddell?
one question, Dr. Hickman. In terms of ESSA and the new requirements for that, the budget that you're presenting, what types of changes can we expect to see, if any, in order to make sure that we're meeting those required regulations for ESSA?
Within our budget or within the programs that we're offering?
Well, within our budget, are we looking to see any increases in our budget because we're trying to make sure that we meet the requirements of ESSA?
And Ms. Riddell, if you don't mind, just clarify ESSA.
Oh, Every Student Succeeds Act
Right,
is
right.
the new federal education regulation that has come down. That's kind of shifting away from just, gauging student achievement on standardized tests.
Right.
So, Dr. Hickman.
Right. The state of Mississippi still, I know we have a couple of more committees to figure out how we're going to do the assessment part of it, but
Yeah.
they don't foresee any changes with the requirements from the state end of it. And so we already had aligned our steps to what needed to be fulfilled in ESSA.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Fisher.
I heard it stated that when we look at the loss of personnel, that we will try to be kind of conservative in replacing personnel for instructional. But what about counseling? Are we leaving that alone as well?
Are we leaving it alone? Just to be honest, I know that the personnel that we were looking at was nurses, reducing nurses. The way that we're trying to make that up with nurses is that I have contacted MUW, and I have our home and communication person, Ms. Buxton, is also contacting state. And what we're trying to do is, we're actually trying to do twofold. One is to get their students who are higher up and almost finished to come and kind of do a rotation through our schools. The other thing that we're trying to do is pretty, I think, innovative, although I've seen it before. I'm in one of my other buildings in Houston. But what we're trying to do is kind of have a wellness center. And so at least, I'm just asking for an hour, 2 hours after school, if we could have those nurses in one of our locales, and they can offer free services, primary services to our staff. That helps with the teachers who want to leave, or not teachers can't get off work, but how they keep missing work. And so some of that heads off, kind of provides that attention to those teachers who feel that they, and we have a lot of teachers that actually miss work, but don't go to the doctor because they can't afford it, and our assistant teachers. And then also their families, if they can, they have, our teachers and our students. And then if we could take it a step further, we will include their family and parents that want to come through. If we can have that articulation agreement with the W, or someone that has those mature, like I said, nursing students, and we have provide a wellness center. The answer to your other question is that we were trying to see if within that wellness center, that it not just be the physical health, but mental. So if it can be staffed with free counseling, free consultation, like those kind of things, just to kind of get people in the door, just so we can have a community of school model. But no, we in our cuts right now, it doesn't include our counseling staff.
And what about safety? Is that being considered as
So one of our,
something that shouldn't be?
if you're saying our police officers, SROs, we're thinking about, it depends. We have a very short list of people who applied for Chief Bonner's position. Everybody knows Chief Bonner's returned. And I don't mean to turn my back, this is how it is. And so if it's an internal hire, then we will not replace that person. Well, actually, we were thinking about not replacing one period. If it's we have one person that applied outside. If it's that, then we will reduce it by the last person in.
So in terms of security at the schools, which schools would be minus one security officer? Or how would that work?
How's it considered?
Believe it or not, we don't even have one at the alternative school. The only schools that we have on staff is at the middle school and high school. Our alternative school, although we are looking to put another program at Success Academy for our high school students who are not being successful, but right now, so it would be either or, and they do rotation. They go back and forth as it is to begin with.
So, and to answer your question, because I believe Chief Bonner he would float from location to location. I mean, if there was something that came up at the elementary school or what, I mean, he would move around. So the
Right.
person that when you hire the person to replace Chief Bonner, they would still follow that same procedure, correct?
Right.
And they would still float between location to location.
Right.
So forth.
And that was the issue with the car. He has always put a request for a car, which we again, this year, I don't think we can fulfill that request. But because if that person was tied up and they need a person at another building, they don't have the transportation to go, and you know, the flashing lights kind of transportation to make it expedient to go to another location.
Well, just one question I have, just as I recall, reading not long ago, where I think we had, I say we, because everybody's city, the police department had an extra motorcycle or something, and they were gonna loan it out to either the county or the task force or something. And this may be a question for Mr. Dunn. Could we approach the city and see if they have a spare police car that we could use in these just for those particular operations of the SROs? I mean, is that out of line? I mean, is that something that could be a topic of discussion?
There's absolutely no problem with approaching the city, and there would have to be some sort of interlocal agreement entered into, just one of those standard interlocal agreements, if you were going to share it. But there's certainly no prohibition against approaching and seeing whether that's possible.
Well, and the reason I say this is because, and I test anyone to do this, because I go down the street quite frequently where I live, and there's always a car parked over at this gas station, and I know it's there for security purposes. I know they've had some incidents and everything there, but if they've got cars to park around town and just sit there for the appearance that an officer may be working there behind the counter to thwart off any type of illegal activity, possibly they have maybe one extra one somewhere else that they don't have parked around town that they could lend to us throughout the school year, and maybe even use it after hours, but that we could use during school hours back and forth. I mean, is that something that we could board? I mean, would y'all be okay asking Dr. Hickman to just maybe see if there's a possibility of doing that? I mean, it saves us from having to buy a car and we fulfill a need that we have.
May I?
Sure.
I think that's a very good idea, but I don't think it should be limited to vehicles then. If we're going to go into an interlocal agreement with the city of Columbus for anything, I think we should, in consideration of our budget request, look for lawn service and any other services that the city can provide that would impact our
Save our
expenses.
time. I mean, I'm good. I mean, I'm just asking, since we're all in this together, why not just approach and see what can be done and what cannot be done? I think that's a good point, some of these different
Sure, you
areas.
can get it done.
I mean, you already got the equipment, you got the personnel, why not? Even if you don't do all locations, some, I mean, that saves dollars, so.
But also, most of the cars that you see parked at businesses can't run anyway.
Sure.
So it's just there as a psychological deterrent, that's it.
Well, and that's true, and I just look at it more along the lines that maybe they have one they just pulled out that may have high mileage but still functions well, but they want to replace it with a new charger or something, and so, because I don't know, but I just see them kind of like, as I'm sure you have,
It's
parked
worth-
different
it's worth
locations, why
asking.
not worth asking, so.
It's worth asking.
Dr. Hickman, would you mind just kind of asking and seeing on those topics?
Am I
And then-
limited to, did we just only agree to car service and line service, or?
Well, I mean,
And any other services
Well, I
that
mean,
the
any,
city
I mean, I would think
provides, so that would
services
help us.
that, you know, obviously the tax base is a tax base, whether you're paying it for their services or you're paying it for, you know, our services here. So, I mean, just some of the things that may be, I would say overlapping in each other's budget, that they may be more staffed and more equipped than what we are in those functions, so. And then just kind of maybe make a list that you feel that those are, because I mean, we don't necessarily know to identify them all as of what we've talked about, and then come back and see, okay, this is what we could look at that we have similarities, and this is what we could discuss and what we have discussed that can work, and these would make sense because we can't have this going on in our school district, our school grounds, because we have different vetting process or whatever than what they may have to do those jobs in the city. See my point? So,
No, I think both of you guys have an excellent point.
so,
Appreciate that.
I do have one other thing,
Yes,
though.
Ms. Burdette.
Dr. Hickman, will you come back to us with a proposal before making a decision about the security officers? Because in thinking about the two school buildings where we have SROs primarily, they're pretty large, and they're kind of fragmented in terms of the hallways and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure that we're not jumping the gun and, you know, that we're downsizing to a point where it's going to impact the way that people feel about being in the school, that they feel safe, and that they know that somebody can respond to Hall A pretty quickly, you know, even if they're someplace else in the building. So that's my concern.
But- And just a word of caution, and this is just so you guys can also think of this context. That's not the job of the SROs. The SROs are supposed to protect against outside threats. Those things that happen within the school are actually school administration issues and school discipline issues that end up turning into criminal issues. The same thing that they were talking about with the cradle to prison pipeline is that we actually force kids to interact with officers in a negative way before they even get out, and it's kind of training them to get used to that within the system. Just a word of caution, because when we grew up, if there were fights, which fights happen everywhere, they happen in the county, they happen at the richest schools in the world, the administration happened.
So if there's an outside threat posed on Hall A, then someone needs to be able to respond and react to that.
And we haven't had any, except I would say, you know, the isolated situations with the high school here that were brought to the board. You know, like if someone had brought an inappropriate object or had brought inappropriate object, either way, whether it's a harmful object or both of them are harmful, chemical-based or a physical-based weapon, I guess we could say that. But I do respect what you guys are saying, because, and one of the things that we're looking at how we structure our school and how do we respond to those students who are starting to escalate their behaviors within our regular classroom setting. And I'm working real hard with the administration to try those two programs to where we have kind of a school within a school model, to where those students who need that extra care, that they are alongside, they're kind of in a different area, to where we can provide more social emotional support for those students. Or sometimes all they needed to get away from that environment, because they know that right now they don't have, for one reason or another, I'm not saying mentally, but they don't have the same skills as other kids, but they do have survival skills. And one of that is not to be embarrassed, not to look like you don't have respect. And so your natural reaction, if you don't know something, instead of looking less than, then you attribute it to your behavior. It's better to be kicked out and be in trouble for your behavior than to be looked upon in your peers for being academically challenged.
My last point about the SROs, Dr. Hickman, is I know that you have some SROs who are certified to do trainings and things like anti-bullying and that sort of thing. And so I'm hoping that maybe that's something that they can do in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, when I talked to Chief Bonner, because he has the first day that I've gotten here, he's always talked about doing a DARE program or doing any kind of prevention program. But recently he is, because I've always given him the green light. I'm serious. But recently he informed me that when they did do those programs, they had more officers. So he's saying that the issue now is that they don't have the number of officers to be able to do that, and then whatever else they're doing now, kind of patrol the area. So that's the conflict. That's the inherent conflict that's
Which
going
is
on.
why I wouldn't want to lose the one that we're talking about.
I understand.
Thank Thank you for that. I
Thank
you. Yes, ma'am.
appreciate it.
And it may be that, well, even if they offer it after school, we're paying extra amount, but that may be worth it to offer to some students after school, and as a natural consequence to those students who are engaging in bullying and aggressive behavior, maybe one of their solutions to their consequences is that they have to stay after to go through this workshop. And then the same thing, we can take up some of our teacher training time, and they can provide the warning signs or whatever else they need to provide for those teachers to be able to look out and not be adult bullies as well.
Right. That's a good point. Did that answer your question? Okay. Ms. Holmes, a couple questions that I have, or several questions that I have. Starting for the Fed reduction, the federal funds reduction, and everything that we've talked about. It's my understanding, going all the way back to Mr. Brown, is that when you set your federal budget, that, you know, whether it be SPED, Title I, all these other ones, they say start at 85% and you kind of work your way back up to, you know, 100% or whatever it happens to be. And I know that there's a lot of things up in the air right now with what's going on in Washington, D.C. as to what gets funded, what's going to be cut, all these other things that we can't really, we can't work with. We have to kind of work with what we know. And so one thing that I'm curious about is to understand, when you see a reduction in funds and your anticipation reduction in funds, are those programs, for example, like grant programs that we're looking at, that we're saying, well, we've had this going on in the district, and so if they cut out funding for this, then the district is going to have to come up with the money to make those programs work, or we're going to have to stop the program? Or are you looking at it saying, okay, well, they're not going to pay as much for food service, which is an integral part of running the operation here for feeding children? Do you see the difference in the two situations?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
With the federal revenues, as we saw in the final allocation that we were provided, I believe, last month, we were only awarded Title I to this point. So right now, we've been advised to proceed with budgeting and, you know, preparing our operations as if we're not going to get those other funds.
The food service or any?
No. I'm thinking only of Title right now.
Okay, sure.
Those Title funds,
Okay.
Title I, and if you would notice, even though to your point you said 85%, but the title allocation was only 78%. So even that 85% is not a good conservative number to use anymore for budgeting purposes. They took even more cuts from the 85%, of course. But right now, our Title I allocation is only 78%, versus over the years it has been 80. You know, we would go with the 85%.
Sure.
But any of those programs, Dr. Hickman and his the other administrators will meet to determine which programs could be eliminated with those federal funds provided to us without severely adversely affecting those instructional needs. And we have started that process already too with Title. We've decided which, okay, we can do this, we can't do this, we can't fund this position anymore, those things. So we've gone through a scrub process with the Title funds already.
So the better, not the better, because you did a great job of explaining, just, and I want to try to hit what he's saying. I mean, obviously there's a prediction that free and reduced lunch, that was the statement that was made, will be eliminated. That was a statement that was made by the administration, but that hasn't been touched yet. But that's good to anticipate. I mean, we have to think about that. But regardless, that just means that we have to go back to how it was before, where people paid, and those who actually couldn't afford it, they just will not eat, and that's not, I mean, that's not a good thing. We have to figure that out as a community. But to answer your question, and it kind of goes back around, to circle back around to the questions, the statements that you guys just made. So we want Title II and those kind of things. That was a lot of professional development. But the reduction in funds that we had, we really didn't have programs, because we didn't have the 21st Century Grant, which was the after school, we didn't have a lot of those different programs. So we put people in those positions. So the nurses were funded under our federal. the curriculum coordinators that we're cutting were funded under our, so we had salaries under those positions, and we had to figure out what can the district pay for. As you see in the budget request, even though the overall request is going up, 13, please note that we're actually asking for less in operations. The increase came in the debt. So we have a smaller budget, and we have smaller supplemental funds that supported that. So we eliminated things that we were paying for in the operations in the general budget, and then we, in order to take on some of those salaries. So traditionally we had, I think, 7 curriculum coordinators, and now we're down to 3 that's going to support the entire district. So we have to look at reducing the nurses. They were funded in our federal budget. And there's some other, that's why you see that we, just so make sure transparent, the testing position is mandated. Deb Murray was in the technology, instructional technology position. We eliminated that position in order, so we're really, it's really a kind of a, the biggest bang for our buck was was elimination, I mean, it sounds bad, but elimination of people. And we have always had reductions in education, and people understand that, unfortunately. But that's, and then, so that's where a lot of those positions came from. The special education, I think we have a smaller allocation even this year, because of some practices that were still going on with identifying the way that we were educating the students. Those numbers actually counted against us for having an adult in that position. And so we have even a smaller allocations of adults in the special education. So all those things that we're making up for, to answer your question, but they were not programmatic in nature. Are a lot of programs, deep cutting programs that I can think of. A lot of it is people. We had to eliminate, I think, 13 assistant teachers. Was it 13, 12? It was some number. Do you remember, Pam? Right. And some of that was not, the assistant teachers the way, it was actually the way we did our practice, where we had an abundance. And we were, and so from a service standpoint as a district, we fulfill the request that our buildings, ask of us. And so, but then when we go to the buildings and we see that Jason Spears is a interventionist, and I'm using that interventionist on purpose because we have to eliminate our interventionists. And every time I go down there, Jason Spears is in the office, and he's doing officerial work throughout the district, not one building, throughout the district. And so, when we look at, then you're not using these appropriately, so then you don't need them. I mean, that's how we went with so some of our TAs that we eliminated, really a lot of them were a position that was created called interventionist, which I would even say is an odd practice that so not being disrespectful, they are hardworking people, but it's an odd practice to have your least educated person intervening with students of the most need anyway. But that's been the practice of the district with something like this.
So I have a question.
Ms. Friedel.
In terms of assistant teachers in those critical grades, and not every grade is critical, and I understand that, but we talk about the 3rd grade reading gate, and some of the pre-K and 1st grade. When you're making the decisions about which ones not to replace, how are you thinking about that?
Did you want to answer that? You ran up here.
That's,
you want to grab the mic?
Thank you, Ms. Lenore.
But could I answer one more question? There are other practices that in our district that we felt that we were doing kind of wrong, or the principals actually that other districts, so we were more squeamish about retaining a second grade student, right? And so even though that second grade student, may not have hit the mark in the past, I don't think anybody has retained that student. Well, then it hurts us when they're in third grade and then they go to the third grade reading gate, that student is retained. It hurts us, meaning that student was going to be retained regardless. It hurts if you want to play a numbers game, right? Because we're at 94%, which last year we were at 93 at the end, and we're at 94% already now, and we still have the catch-up group during the summer, which is great. But a lot of those students, what we're finding out as the principals now that they're really looking at their data, those students shouldn't have been in third grade. And so some of that is going to be shored up in that sense. But Pam, you can, Ms. Lenore, if you want to add clarity to her question about the critical areas of yeah.
The assistant teachers.
Yes, ma'am.
We basically looked at where we are required to have assistant teachers in the pre-kindergarten program, which we partner with Head Start for pre-kindergarten, and they provide the assistant teachers in all of our pre-kindergarten programs across the district. We're required to have them in kindergarten and also first grade. So across the district, we looked to see where we had extra assistant teachers, because years back, we had assistant teachers in several buildings in grades as high up as second and third. So those were the assistant teachers that we really looked at eliminating. Also, we looked at assistant teachers that, say we eliminated a kindergarten spot at Cook from last school year because there weren't enough kindergarten students there to support the extra teacher unit. So that teacher had an assistant teacher assigned to her. So those were the positions that we eliminated. If there was a teacher unit cut in kindergarten or first grade and there was an assistant teacher still assigned in that position, then we eliminated that position.
And trust us, it's hard. I mean, this is a small community. I started to get to know a lot of people, and at this point in time, to tell those folks, you know, that they did not have jobs and they were solid. There's some solid people. It's hard.
Any other questions on the federal funds? And I appreciate you going through that and answering our questions. And just as I'm sure you will, as we continue to move forward toward July, August, and even June, certainly, if there's more release on movement in Washington and what they'll fund and any changes to what we kind of understand how things work, please bring it back to us on that federal fund side. The other question I have is more some of the things that we as a district have been doing. And, you know, we've had the Saturday CE, and we've committed dollars to this. You know, we didn't set up a special fund for it, but I know that you had, I think, an objective code or different things that you did to do that. But are we going back through, and now as we've approached the end of the school year, and to see how many dollars are still in those available there to bring back in to say, hey, I know we committed $70,000+ here. When it's all said and done, we still have 4 or 5 or 14,000 or whatever it is that was not expended. So those dollars we can look to say, this is how we can allocate them in this budget, whether it be to, as we were talking about, whether it be a position that, hey, we don't have the money, but if we bring those dollars back in-house from those particular, you know, objectives, now that they're unused, we can do that. Or, hey, we can use this to, you know, to fund the debt, or whatever it may be, is all I'm saying. Is that, are we looking at those other things as through this past year, and maybe even, I wouldn't think that we've had any from a carryover from the year before that, but certainly this school year we're closing out, that you can bring back and say, these are the totals, as we did on the athletic fund that we set up and other things.
Yeah, we actually report on that every board meeting.
Right.
We have a way of reporting that. But just to be honest, I mean, when we talk about searching money and those kind of things, so there's other end of year things that we're and correct me if I'm wrong, Pam and Tammy, but there's end of year things that we have to actually eliminate that we wouldn't have eliminated before, like end of year repairs. We're not going to be able to do all the repairs, you know, that we want to. And there's a bunch of end of year costs. So it's not really money that's left over I know we can't use that money, like you said, without, the way it was allocated, but I think that was the only set of money that we set aside, was that money that we put for after-school tutoring, community university, and those kind of things. I don't think we requested any other money to be set aside in that sense. That's specifically earmarked for something. Yeah, right.
Well, I guess the whole thing is that, as we go through June 30th, you'll start the process of closing out the books and shoring up everything and final transactions. So we really won't know what that is until October. But certainly as we go into the next budget year, if there are dollars that were harvested out of that were not used, then we will get a tally of, as we do, of that, plus the programs that I'm talking about. It wouldn't just be one lump sum number. It'd say this comes from this source, and these are, after we finalized the books and got everything ready, that this is the amount that was left over. So,
May I provide you with another answer as well?
sure.
Okay, so the other part of that answer is any programs that we have that are due for next year, that are kind of due within this budget cycle, we're paying that off, so we won't have to include that within the next year's budget. Any subscriptions, those kind of things as well. And so we're combing through and seeing how can we eliminate. One is because we have a reduced budget, operation budget this year, but trust me, we're looking at what positions that we can keep and what we can eliminate.
No, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with that, and I guess the subscription word just kind of threw me off a little bit, because I understand that, like, even though things may end June 30th, as far as the budget, they still continue to post things. We're not necessarily making designated earmarks for the next year out of this year's budget carry forward. It's just that
the ones that are due now, like if they end at the end of this year.
Right.
Right.
Right. No, I get that. And yes, I mean, that's just part of closing out the books, that you're on the accounting front making those different things.
Right.
But I was just saying that we're not actually, like we've done in the past, we're not making any earmarks of dollars to carry forward into the next budget. We're just basically finishing up business throughout, even though it may exceed the June 30th cutoff. We're still just finishing up business for this school year, how it was budgeted out. So, okay.
So even to answer your question even a different way, and I'll get specific. So let's look at the curriculum coordinators. Now we say we have 3. We're still trying to find the monies that we're eliminating, because we know that those 3 positions, even though they're not being covered in the federal anymore, they're important positions. One is because if we eliminated a lot of the professional development, then those are our people that need to be going around doing the professional development. But anyway, but do we know totally how to fund? Do we have the total money to fund those individuals? No, we're still looking at what we have to eliminate to fund those individuals. Right. So we're trying to find money every nook and cranny and fold and everything.
Well, and like anything, I mean, you're just compressing cost everywhere that you can. I mean, we've talked about, for example, and I won't get into too long-winded about it because we have other things we need to talk about, but, like Bailey and Associates, I know we had different things and we paid more because it was like they were going to continue on doing what they were doing for us and everything, but we paid a premium on that, and so it's like, okay, now we're talking about CE, are we getting that extra CE for our buck because we don't have it somewhere else to carve out to do CE? Those are the things I'm asking, is that, okay, are we fully utilizing what we're paying the premium for? Or are we saying, well, look, we paid for this, we don't have the money to do it over here, so you're going to have to do it as a, hey, we kept you in here type thing. So.
No, those folks, and it'll be interesting with those folks, because think about it, that's across the state, across the nation, but that's across the state that Title II and those kind of things are going to be eliminated. So it'll be interesting how they respond to support the school districts through this crisis time. Like you said, in a sense, they kind of, they don't owe us, but in a sense that to lower prices, like those, to be competitive, to consider the context and situation, you would think that they would do some kind of adjustment.
And I'm not necessarily imposing on them. I'm just saying is that as we go through that, is that we're communicating, and I'm sure you are, but I'm just saying it for myself, that we're communicating to them, this is why what we're seeing is going down, and this is what you offer, so we're going to need you to fill in these gaps for us.
I agree.
And everything. So, all right. So that's, as far as questions, does anyone else have any other questions on Ms. Holmes' presentation or anything? I I don't have any at this time.
Can I highlight a few things?
Sure.
And I'm gonna let you highlight a few things or have the final word, but, so just to make sure that we know that within our request, and I'm just echoing again, the way, and I have this little, does everybody have this little separate packet?
Yes.
Okay. And so it's really just looking at the first and last page, where it shows the first page is what we're requesting. And so when I said that we're actually asking for less in the operations, you know, it's a few $100,000 or if that less.
88.
Yes, I'm sorry. And then the increase is coming in the lower amount, which is our debt. Can everybody see that at
Yes.
least? Okay.
And just to be clear, that it says an increase, and the increase that is highlighted in red is just the difference between what the 12.4 number shows and what the 13.1 shows. And that doesn't necessarily take into consideration as to what we will see once Mr. Andrews does his analysis, what a mill per produce. So that's
Right.
not saying there's a tax increase. All it is simply saying is that there's a difference between letter A and letter B.
You want to be sure that you get that out there, right?
Letter A and letter B, right? Okay.
Right, dollars.
Dollars.
There's a difference in the
Right.
dollars.
Okay.
That's a good point.
It is. You got a highlighter
Well,
in there?
dollars.
Struck it there. Okay. All right, so.
And then,
Yes.
and again, on the second page, to make sure, and I'm just reiterating what she said, that you understand that we're actually choosing between, we went with the amount to choose within the last three. And do you mind if I?
Page 91, is that what you're on?
Yes.
All right, page 91 of your packet.
And if anyone disagrees with that, I mean, that we're fine. I know we had talked to Board Member Spears just briefly about it, but not that he was telling us what we needed to do, but but we did kind of look at, that's where we're getting our base figures about was the highest amount of the last three.
Which is what it states on the actual request form, that you can take the highest of the three.
Right.
So it's not some assumption I made. It is stated on the state form that you use.
Right.
And the fiscal year is based on the tax collector's year
Right.
and not our fiscal
Yes.
year, so.
Yes.
There was one more point that I know that we talked about. Do you know? Just in case, remember I talked about, just in case there was a question asked, it was a pattern, it was some kind of pattern, but we can always come back and talk about it. Did you want to end with something?
Just circle back to the date. The ad is due to run June the 2nd, starting on the 2nd, but I don't think we'll really have a time to really meet with everyone before then, and I'm understanding that there will be, Ms. Tippett and Ms. Carter will be out at Metis that week also, so do we want to talk about that date again or not? They're going to be out as well during Metis on June the
Ms.
22nd.
Tippett.
Do you want to do 23rd maybe?
So not to be disrespectful, to help me understand the role that Ms. Tippett will have in that budget meeting? Just the technology role?
And Ms. Carter will be there.
And Ms. Sue?
And Michelle Carter.
Okay, and you don't have any other staff members that can do that, can do these two roles? I'm sorry? Mrs. Davis. Deb Murray? I mean, yeah, I can do that in the sense that Beth showed me, but I don't know who runs the switchboard with the recording. Okay, so we can figure it out. Okay, so we can have somebody here. Was that what you wanted to say?
Just to remind everyone that also one last point is that, again, this homestead loss and the collection fees are not in this request. So there will be additional monies that will be added to our request to cover those collection costs and homestead losses from Mr. Andrews' office once we receive those numbers. So the 13.1 million is what we're requesting at this point. And again, once we get the new property value, that will be included
And
after the fact.
And let me just say that
Yes.
the add-on costs that you were just referring to, the collection costs and everything, those dollars do not come to us. Those are paid to the city and paid to to Mr. Andrews' office.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, that's an in-kind amount that we can talk about services.
Right.
Not that, I'm just kidding.
Right. Okay. So,
And one last thing, and we also did not put in what we have a right to put in would be the 4% increase. I just wanted to make sure the board understood that as well.
right. And just also clarifies that that also goes into is once we go through the year and you're, basically shoring up the base, that's a number that, as far as that we can go up to if the base exceeds that and not have to declare it as surplus tax collections, correct? Okay. So, I mean, essentially,
Allowable.
we're not necessarily asking for it on our request, but we may, if property values go up and other things continue to work in our favor, we may still collect more and may actually harvest some of that 4% we could have asked for through those collections. So, just so that, excuse me, all that's, clear. Okay. Is there any more questions, or we want to move to the next item? Okay. Next, we have the consideration to approve the master, which is item number 5 on the agenda, consideration to approve the master lease program. And Dr. Hickman, I know we've had time to look over, and I think in my reading through,
The answer to some of your questions?
well, that's under Eco-Ride. That's the next part. This is master lease program
we're
we're
talking
talking
about
about. So we have the resolution, and if you don't mind, Mr. Dunn, the resolution that we have here before us from the master lease program, you have, or Mr. Hickman has reviewed it?
Correct.
Okay.
Approved it.
Okay. And so my question, just a couple questions that I have, it's basically $90,000 is what we're assuming per bus. Is that correct? And that's why there's the $900,000 stated. And it says not to exceed $900,000. So we're
'Cause
sure.
That's where we set it.
Okay, but what I'm saying is we're certain that $90,000 is a good number that we're going to be able to get 10 buses for. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, my next question is, are all the buses going to be put into service this school year? Because I assume we go ahead and if we sign off on this resolution that we would buy 10 buses and they would be running routes this coming school year
Yes, sir.
and everything. So in our planning, we realized that, hey, we're installing 10 buses here in 2017-18, and so their likelihood in 2027, 2028 is going to be getting to the end, and we're going to have a large purchase at that point if we're going to have to replace the fleet, for the buses that would be 10 years old at that point down the line.
Right. And
Good thing
we will
about
have
it-
some of the debt roll off.
Well, all the debt will be paid by then
Well, yeah.
if these charts are right. 2025, I think, is the last one that's paid off. So, but I guess my question is that really it just goes to the heart of all the buses that are talked about in this resolution with master lease program would be put into operation this coming school year.
And Mr. Spears, I just want to make sure we know, and one of the things that I learned from working as a superintendent is that there's other variables that go into it. So after, we get the paperwork to them on time. If we meet whatever their deadline and all that, but yes, allegedly, when everything is done on
No,
both
I
ends.
get that. I'm just
yeah.
saying it's like your plan is, I guess I should have
The
stated.
plan
Is that we're not going to buy 2 this year
Right.
for this school year and then 6 the
Oh, no,
next.
sir.
I mean, it
No,
would
sir.
be that we approve this resolution and we have given you the authority to go buy 10, and the timelines work out as the timelines work out, but we're expecting to try to get them in operation this coming school session.
Yes, sir.
School year. Okay. Now, the only thing is more of a technical thing. Mr. Dunn, I noticed on the certification of resolution that I think it would be after the actual resolution part of it. And it just looks like a typo. If you look in the first line, it says Columbus Municipal, but it has like C9 PAL. It's the, 96 in the packet. And if you see in that top line, it just says the board, it says Columbus Municipal, but it has a 9 in the middle. And I mean, I'm sure that there's just, like I said, it's just a clerical thing, but there's no problem in
No.
cleaning that up. Okay,
No.
okay, all right. So, and I may have missed some others, but I mean, that's just one thing that jumped out at me. Dr. Hickman, do you have any things you want to talk about under the master lease program?
No, I mean, I support the, the master lease program. My recommendation is that we do it.
And
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Dodd? if you don't-
whoever makes the motion can say, with the municipal corrected for the I being, a 9 being changed to an I. So
Okay.
Be no problem.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yes, Ms. Fisher?
Thank you. You mentioned, you questioned whether or not the 10 buses would be used immediately upon purchase, correct? And you also mentioned that in 2025, 6, 7?
27, 28 school year, they
27,
would be hitting a
28.
10-year lifespan.
Are we counting the entire fleet? Because not just those 10 buses will be aged.
Right.
We're looking at the current fleet where we have
Right.
buses that are over age.
Well, it's my understanding from our previous meetings discussion is that, and I think Miss Hall, I think, was the representative from the master lease program out of Dallas, that had said that we could, as we go forward, that we would be able to still utilize this program. And so while we may this year say we want 10, as they go through and they look at the budget and they do their calculations, say we need to install 5 more buses, whatever, then we could come back and have a new reissue of this master lease program, or a
Right.
combination of like we're talking about today, to continue to build out our fleet so that we do have a rolling amount that would still have, hey, this one's not as old as the other, and continue to go that way. It's my understanding. Is that correct, Dr. Hickman? So it's not just a one and done
Yeah,
proposition as
and
much as it is
that's-
about that it could be a tool that we could utilize as we move ahead. Sure.
I'm sorry? I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I said I remember Ms. Hall's explanation. That's why I wanted to ask that
Sure.
question, to make sure that it's clear.
Sure. Okay. Did that answer the question? Okay. All right. So board, is there any other questions or discussion on the master lease program that we've got before us? And Mr. Dunn said he's reviewed it, and of course, as he mentioned, we could just make the motion to include the adjustment of or correct the spelling into the municipal part of the resolution. So do I have a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve the resolution with the one change of the correction of the spelling of municipal in Columbus Municipal School District.
Okay, it has been motioned by Ms. Verdell. Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been, the motion has been seconded by Dr. Shoemake. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to the next item on the agenda, and I think Ms. Tippett was going to, he's on the line? Who's on the line? Ryan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you all, Mr. Spears.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
All right. We have Ryan from EcoRide on the line with us, and we're moving to item number 6, and 6A of the EcoRide contract is the consideration to approve the EcoRide contract extension, and then we have the vehicle lease comparison. And of course, just as we did with the master lease program, we'll have some discussion about it. Now, board, do you have any questions? Because I know I had submitted to Dr. Hickman and Mr. Dunn. I think they forwarded them on to EcoRide. There's some questions that I had sent to them with respect to some of the different areas here. And so does everyone have a copy of the question and answer that was provided to us? And so if you don't mind, Ryan, we have this in front of us, but we can kind of go through it just to make sure if anyone else had the same questions that we, cover those. So
Yeah.
the first question was, with respect to owner or operator-owned leased buses, how will fuel and tires be managed and costs separated? If EcoRide are using the buses in their side business, which the side business, just to clarify, is more of like a chartering service, is that correct? Leasing those particular buses out for whether it be MSU football games or anything else that you would want to try to gain business with, is that correct?
Yeah, and local organizations within the community itself, for example, the YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, or any other organization that would need transportation, that we could then have the ability to be partnering and working with them independently through us with our vehicles.
Okay. And so basically, under the proposed contract of the extension, the school district is responsible for all tires and all buses, but you have basically stated that on those 5 buses that's being proposed that we lease from EcoRide that would be operator-owned, that those would not, that the district would not have to pay for the tires, and then, of course, on the fuel side of it, that, you would make certain that the tank is full for the next school day operation.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, and of course, at any point, the board could request that information be provided as to how you're calculating, or that you're tracking the tire replacement and other things on the buses, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. And then my second, board, do you have any other questions with respect to that? Okay, and I think that's a good question. Will our name, the Columbus Municipal School District, that normally is on the side of the school buses, will that be covered up when they're out on, say a chartered type of service? Or will it still?
Yep, there would be a yellow, exactly, there'd be a yellow magnet that would be covering the school for non-school activities.
Okay, all right, thank you. My second question was, will EcoRide charter services compete to provide the district with travel outside of normal busing, such as field trips, etc.? And your answer is basically be consistent with what we've been doing over the prior years. And so, of course, be able to use the, district's vehicles for district charter operations to keep costs down. And when you say cost down, you're pretty much saying the cost that we as a district incur for those type of services.
Yep, it would be, so for any field trips or any programs, it would be run the same as they historically have been run.
Okay, all right.
So there would be no change to that or impact to the district.
Okay. The third question, with the operator-owned buses, will repair costs be deducted from the proposed $150,000 a year allowance? How will these repair costs be tracked separately from our school-owned fleet? And your answer to that was EcoRide uses electronic record-keeping system to track repairs and maintenance. Repairs and maintenance on contractor-owned vehicles will be accounted for separately and excluded from the $150K annual allowance. So, I think that's good because, in using a different operation.
Yep, exactly.
Do you have other comment about it or anything? Ryan?
No, it's
okay.
not at this time.
Board member, you have any? Okay.
Is there any way that how do we know for sure?
How do we know for sure?
That we're not paying for those repairs? Do they have to report back?
Well, as far as, I think that's a valid question, is how do we know for certain that those repairs aren't being to use? But you said that it's just, Superintendent, ask, Dr. Hickman, if you would just ask the question there.
Sorry, the question that I ask is how do we know for sure that we're not paying for, not that we don't trust you, but just from an accounting standpoint and a check and balance standpoint, how do we know for sure that we're not paying for those tires or those repairs of those buses? Do you guys have a report sheet that, that we can see yearly, monthly, or quarterly or something to that effect, that we know that there's not kind of crossbreeding of those buses?
Yeah, we could provide no problem with the maintenance completed on the per bus, and really what you would see within the vehicles that we'd be providing, obviously there would not be that much maintenance on those, as this is more geared towards the older buses in the Columbus fleet. So, but yeah, we could provide documentation.
Okay.
And we don't need that.
And- Okay. Fourth question is, with respect to route service, how it will be determined which buses will be utilized? Different routes equate to more usage in the district, considering purchasing 10 new buses under the master lease program, which is what we just took care of doing, and the operator putting 5 new buses into the fleet. Will the district run longer routes and log more hours than the operator fleet? And will this be disclosed to the board? And it says we will disclose total route miles and route miles for operator-owned vehicles. So I
Essentially
guess
stating that naturally we'd be reporting all total miles, so we would be doing the total miles and then a breakout of the contractor-owned miles.
right. Okay. And so I mean, I guess you would say what you're saying is you could report the total miles and everything, but I guess the heart of my question is more along the lines is that when you make the judgment call, there's not just well, these are longer routes, so we're going to put the district-owned ones on these longer routes versus, our fleet ones that are the operator-owned. So,
Yeah, we look to be focused on essentially the buses that we could be pulling out of service to be replacing them with the new buses, all 10 of them. So we could be working with you and providing that as those decisions are being made.
okay. My last question, in reviewing the proposal, it states CMSD will agree to pay $85.79 a day for a guaranteed 180 days. What does the 85.79 amount include? In your response, it includes the vehicle use for school route services and all associated repairs and maintenance.
Inclusive of tires.
Inclusive of tires, correct. And while I understand your answer, the one thing I would like a little bit more clarification about, if we're talking, this is all buses, operator and district-owned vehicles. So basically, to use that, it's my understanding is that your proposal of, I think it starts at $1.9 million for the service, that does not include if the board elects to also lease the 5 buses through you, that there's an additional charge for that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it would only be applied towards the 5 vehicles, not on all. I don't know if the phone broke up, but I thought you might have asked if it was for all routes, which is not the case. It would be for the 5.
I apologize. The connection was a little bit. Could you restate that once again, please?
Yeah, I was just, Mr. Spears, looking to confirm that 85.79 daily rate would be only for 5 vehicles, not for all of the routes. I'm not sure if that's what you had asked with the connection breaking up.
Okay. All right. Okay. But that amount per day for 180 days times 5 is additional to the 1.9 base number that you're talking about.
Yes, correct. And it would result, theoretically, and then 5 less buses through the master lease program.
Okay. All right. Sure, and I understand that. Board, before I have any other questions, certainly they've answered, and I appreciate you very much working with Dr. Hickman and others to answer my questions that I'd submitted to you. And I do have just a couple others, but board members, questions?
I do.
Yes, Ms. Fisher.
I just want to clarify that the 85.79 is for per bus out of the additional 5 per day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 77.
So that's, I think you said $77,000 for those 5. Okay, all right. Okay. Dr. Schumann. Okay, the other question that I have is with respect to, in your proposal, pretty much it stipulates that, we as the district have to adhere to the schedule of replacing the fleet over time over the coming 4 school years. And so, of course, you know, we have just approved 10 new purchases under the master lease program. And, of course, you're proposing putting 5 in. And so in your first year, it shows 10. And then, of course, the next year it shows 9. And I know this is just a point of clarification more than anything, but that would be 15 buses going in this year. So really looking at next year, we're only talking about 4 more buses to still stay on point. You're not going to enforce and say, well, we said 9 in the contract and exclude your 5 from that purchase, from that number.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Spears.
Okay. The other thing that I have a question about, and I've certainly asked it many times, goes to the point of the 2.75, the 2.5, the 2.75, and the 2.5 increase in rates year after year. And I'm sure that as you work with other districts, and certainly no stranger in our district, that you understand that it's very difficult as we're forecasting our cost management going forward, because while we sit here and we kind of have an idea as to what our allocation will be, which is some of the things we touched on before our talk here, we don't even know what the formula is going to provide to us under the state funding next year, and different things. And so one thing that I'm curious about is, since the board, certainly this is a different modification to what we have entertained with you over the last contract, but we're cutting and not looking to increase. My point is that I can feel a lot better about the flexibility you have as running the service and other things if we didn't have this 2.7 plus. And I understand your business, you have to make a certain amount of money, and you've worked with the district on a number of fronts, but this annual increase gives me a lot of unrest, just because the fact is that we can say that we're going up, and we're going to have higher collections, but certainly in the world we live in, and you know it as well as I do, that's no guarantee. So what is the ability of Eco-Ride to say, okay, well, we'll not take the annual increase in this contract and modify it? I mean, is that a deal breaker for you? Because in my mind it is.
And that would be something that Brendan Siebers actually was unavailable to be on this call today, but that would be something. I would say with the increases that were proposed at the 2.75 and the 2.5, I think some of the data and information submitted later yesterday showed that truly those increases are below market. Normal contracts are renewing at 3% plus. CPI index over the past 4 years has averaged 3.5%, with as much as 5.5% in the year 2015. So, the increases proposed are still well under the market rate, and really it allows us to be providing the services. We've ensured no driver shortage over the past 4 years, when 90% of school districts around the country are experiencing it. We'd be able to increase driver wages, and that's kind of some of the rationale behind that as requested.
Sure. Okay. Well, one thing that I look at too is that just as we're having to try to co-op with services and different things, and this is just me speaking, but I'm not good with the increases, because we're seeing cuts, and personnel is more paramount to me than working on having to forecast an operator increase. So is there any flexibility in your mind of being able to say, well, the first 2 years of this contract, there will be no increases, just till we get some certainty on what our new formula will be coming out of state, and knowing what our trend will be in revenues from the feds as a new administration continues to retool things?
Yeah, I would not have the ability to say so, but I feel that from the team standpoint that this the amendment that was presented was what the team was able to do from a working, and we were able to go down from the 2.75 in years 2 and 4 as we're trying to find other ways that we can be working with you. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Spears.
It does. Okay. And there's no flexibility, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, no, and I apologize, but I'm not able to speak on that, but I know that in talking with our executive leadership team that we had come down in working with Dr. Hickman and Mr. Shannon over the past couple months to get to what we felt was, the best amendment that we could provide to the district.
Okay.
So I
Yes,
was
Ms.
just, I
Riddell.
was just gonna say, I understand the position that we really would like to hold costs as flat as we possibly can, and that is absolutely the right move to try and make. But then I also understand that by committing to the rate that we've been given, that we're really avoiding some risk of having an increase higher than the 2.5 and the 2.75. So I think we're doing due diligence in making sure that we know that that's the most that it's going to cost us versus, not doing anything right now and being hit with a percent that's a lot higher than the 2.75.
And that it's under fair market value already.
Exactly, and those are both valid points that I was going to also bring up, so appreciate those.
All right. With that being said, I mean, yes, Ms. Fisher. Yes, go ahead.
I have one question on, regarding under the agreements, and I believe that's section 3B. Can you explain that to me? Because I see here that the district will be purchasing 5, it's listed that the district will be obligated to purchase 5, and the company, the contractor, will also purchase 5. How do we get to that number if we're purchasing 10?
Right.
And could you repeat that? The phone was kind of breaking up, but just so I can have clarity in
Yes,
providing
I
that
will.
answer.
Page 2.
Page 2,
Yep.
section 3B, as in boy. Can you explain how this is calculated? You're saying the district is going to purchase 5 and the contractor will purchase 5, but the district is actually purchasing 10, I believe, in 2017-18?
Yeah, so I think that that would just be that it was a minimum of that, but if that's something that we would need to do, make an amendment to, or we could discuss it now, we could make that 15 in year 1, 4 in year 2, 6 in year 3, and 6 in year 4. It really was focusing on getting the new vehicles in at 31 over that 4-year period to help with the aging fleet.
And Mr. Dunn, as far as the language that Ms. Fisher is pointing out, I assume if we were to take this up, it would need to be modified. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It needs to reflect what you are agreeing to do.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if someone chooses to make a motion, we can make the motion with the amendment to the correct number being purchased.
Okay.
What page is that, Mr. Fisher?
Page 2, 3B,
Page- yeah.
section B.
99,
In the book.
I'm sorry, 99.
it is both, really. It's 2 and 99.
Yes, Ms. Fisher, is that your question?
I do, but I have another
Yes,
question in that
sure.
same paragraph, 3B. Down here at the end, it gives us the option to buy back at a cost of $1, but it doesn't say what condition these vehicles will be assured to be in. So I want to know if that's $1 after or as is, as you would buy with junk cars, or if that's $1 with repairs, or if it's repaired in a good condition.
Yeah, and to answer that question, it would be $1 as is, but it's in the best interest for Echo Ride in the event, they aren't purchased at that $1, that we would be keeping them up in the best condition as possible. So there would not be, any impact where there would be, maintenance not provided as a result of that. Because at the end of the day, we're focusing on being a partner with Columbus Municipal.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Fisher, to answer.
I just have a concern with that because, and and this is not questioning you, but I'm looking at different scenarios. If a vehicle, a bus, is in poor working orders at the end of its life, and there are no repairs made, and we're paying anything above $150,000, I think, a year, even in that year, how can we be assured that we're not purchasing a piece of junk for $1? That we're actually purchasing?
Yeah, I think, I mean, well, how I would, I guess, phrase it would be is that it's the option of the district to do so. And it's not binding you in, but it's our goal and our business practice to ensure the vehicles are kept. But it's not, I guess, having you have to take those on, as it's an option that we wanted to add as part of the negotiation to model and have it be as similar to that master lease program, where after the 10 years, you know, the district could have 100% ownership of them. So it was more of an effort by us to match that master lease as a, you know, a way to benefit Columbus in this amendment.
Thank you very much for that. And I have just actually a piggyback off of what Ms. Fisher had just stated. One question I have is, obviously, the 10 years down the line, will you be purchasing the same school buses, brand and everything as we're purchasing under the master lease program? Or will it be a different brand?
You're saying would we be buying?
Because I think it's IC buses or something that you had mentioned that you're talking in April to us that we would be looking at purchasing.
Yeah.
Will you be
exactly.
purchasing the same brand?
Yes, we're working with Waterstruck and Tractor as well, and would be keeping the fleet consistent.
Okay, and as far as equipment that's added on, cameras, all the things that our bus is going to have will be the same.
Exactly.
Okay. The other question that I have goes back to, you know, it's just, to me, it doesn't feel right on the 2 point. I know you do your models and you come up with this is what we need to do as far as our spread, and of course, you know, you're taking on the maintenance of the buses that you actually own and different things, and I understand how that works, but you know, I look at things and I think that's, even though you're saying it's under market value, you know, in April you had mentioned, as the presentation was ongoing, that you would provide back information to the board that would show how you come up with the justification of the increase. And aside from, I think Mr. Shannon provided to us the cost per year that was just more of like a typed out on a Word document. These were the total cost in this school year, and the estimated for the current school year. There hasn't been anything else that I have seen on that front. And so, you know, board, it's up to you as to what you want to do. I mean, I would like to table this into our June 5th meeting to get that information provided to us, but
yeah, and Mr. Spears, I think I'll ask, Mr. Shannon, were you able to forward the CPI analysis that was completed and sent over late last night as well?
he says yes, that we have that, which...
And what that does, Mr. Spears, is it shows over the past 4 years the CPI index for transportation-related services, excluding the fuel, which shows an average of 3.4%.
I mean, printing them out here on the spot. I mean, that's the whole point. So we've received them, or okay.
And I was supposed to forward the email.
Speaking to your mic. Just 1 second, sir.
Yeah, I apologize. I was supposed to forward the emails to Mr. Spears and the board, and I didn't. And so that's why we had your questions printed up today. And then Gwen did print up the attachments. It was just abundance of attachments.
Okay, so
yeah, and what that was, Mr. Spears, was that is what shows that over the past 4 years, the average CPI increase for transportation-related services, excluding fuel, was over 3.4%. And again, from a market standpoint, typical annual renewals or increases are 3 to 5%. that then shows the justification and the below market of the 2.75 and the 2.5.
And just because, you know, obviously you're speaking and we have people here, clarify EPI
CPI.
or CP. Okay, CPI. I thought he was saying EPI. That's why I was wondering, what is he talking about?
I'm sorry, Mr. Spears.
Yes. I got CPI. I thought you were saying EPI, and I was like, what is he talking about?
No. It's the CPI for transportation-related services, excluding the impact of fuel.
Sure. And of course, that's a nationwide. That's not necessarily as what we'd ask for specific to our district.
Correct, but that's what goes into all the associated
think
costs with running the student transportation.
Sure. I think the question that I asked was, you know, how it is actually happening in our district, because as you understand, you know, understanding how dynamics play out in the Northeast, the Midwest, West Coast, Southeast, there's a difference in wages, difference in all the other parts that go into that calculation. So it's not necessarily fair to just assume that that how it is on a national level is how it is here, because some parts of the country it might be exceeding that, and I understand that's why you come out with the average that you were using, and I understand why you used it, but my question was actual cost in the district, so that we could do, because even if, you know, JPS, who just let go of their provider, theirs was for different reasons, not necessarily just cost, but my question is more along the lines of, you know, what are the costs here so that we can justify the 2.5, 2.75? That was my question, and what I was asking for information about.
Yeah, which would, I guess, we could provide more information that if as needed outside of, you have driver wages, you have insurance, you have the increased maintenance, which was provided at the last board meeting, in addition to all of the other fixed costs that go into running the student transportation contract.
But basically
that increase every year.
Right, but basically what I'm asking is that you can provide it to show what the actual increase year over year over year for this contract has been, to show us that, okay, this is why we're asking for this. We're asking for 2.75 when it's actually been 4, or we're asking for 2.5 when it's actually been 1.5. I mean, that's how the dots connect for me, and that's why I asked the question that I did.
Yeah, and I think it's also as part of trying to get back to where the market pricing is at other districts around the state as well as the country, where this is, you know, significantly under, which has been over the past 4 years, and this is just trying the normal rates to get that back up to where the levels it needs to be instead of subsidizing and taking losses year over year.
Okay. So, board, what is the will of the board? I mean, I would like, because there's a couple of things that we're just getting, and of course there's obviously the information that he stated, again, that he would provide to the board. You know, I would
and
like
that information, Mr. Spears, if the phone broke up, did you have specific information that you're?
My specific information is why I understand you're using nationwide calculations. My question is to be able to provide to us as to, under the performance of this contract with this district, your year-over-year cost increases have been X, Y, Z, not what it has been in California and you know, Illinois and Tennessee, but what it has been year-over-year in this district.
And I just want to make clear that the supplemental documents that you guys just received was just basically are talking, just like Mr. Spears is saying, it's just giving you guys a look at what inflation and those kind of things to justify their the increase to the 2.7. But it's not that it's. I guess it is pertinent to the contract as far as if you're still trying to wiggle or squeeze out the 2.7.
Yeah, and I think part of it is when you're looking at the maintenance expense as well, Mr. Spears. Over the past 4 years, the amount for just maintenance alone as a standalone category has increased 88%.
Sure.
So I think, again, the pricing that's in this amendment is what our team has felt has been very fair, and what we've tried to provide a partnership with Columbus, and hopefully that's you know.
Well, and I guess my
You
thing
know.
is that, and I totally get, because that's been one of the points of what you've been talking about is maintenance, but we're in the process with the, in approving this, that we're installing, basically, if I understand the numbers correctly, right at 25% of our fleet to be replenished, and those would be the most labor-intensive and cost-intensive part of maintenance of the fleet. And while I know that the other 75% would still have maintenance and different things as far as oil changes and such, but my thing is that, you're basing those calculations off of numbers that should go down as far as maintenance with respect to new
Yeah,
buses.
but-
I understand there's operational maintenance that you have to maintain, but, we're paying for the fuel, we're paying for the tires, but the oil changes, the belts, those different things, the wear and tear, I totally understand what you're saying, but, to say, well, costs have going up, well, we're taking a big dent out of the cost by, taking on, the master lease program and your proposal for 5 buses. So that's why I still say that the 2.75, 2.5 seem, even when you're looking at, the CPI of 3.4%, I mean, those aren't matching apples to apples for me.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a
And I
profit,
would
and I'm
say-
not saying, and I'm not saying, oh, well, we've got to maintain a certain profit margin or anything. I'm not saying that's where you're going with it, but certainly, to me, some of the things that are used in this calculation to come up and justify this, one, we haven't seen the actual numbers for the district. We're going by the assumptions you're putting forward, but to me, those seem high with respect to our district, because the fact is that we're taking a big chunk of the cost out of the equation. And while I know there'll still be maintenance there, what you've been, talked about in the April meeting, and of course in discussion since that point, we're trying to minimize those costs as much as possible. And of course, as we go into next year, we have the opportunity to buy more buses, and that means that cost continues to be compressed. And we go to the 3rd year of the contract that you're proposing, and we buy more buses, and that cost continues to be compressed. So, but we're basically committing here on the front end on old data that's saying that those costs will continue to go up, and that's why we're paying that premium of 275.25, 275.25. So that's why I continue to focus on that point, is the fact is that the reason you're saying that you need it is something we're working to eliminate as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the point on the new vehicles coming in, it's not to eliminate it, it's to really get the fleet age to where it needs to be from the industry recommendations for the average spares, for the average age of the fleet, and it's to bring those up to where they should be, and which then the annual pricing then is still under the market, even though, I think you can't look at bringing the vehicles in as a way to that should be going down in the annual increases, when truly those are being brought in to get the fleet to where they need to be, based on obviously the track record from a maintenance price, or expense standpoint over the past 2 years alone.
Okay. My last question is, in the proposal here, and I know we talked about correcting some of the language I think Ms. Fisher had pointed out of the 5 buses bought by the school and 5 by the provider. If we pursue in future years to do the master lease program and buy more buses for the fleet, is it still going to be you buy 60% and we buy 30%, or is it just that the district, this is the only time you're going to inject operator-owned buses into the fleet?
Yeah, it would be the option of the school district, Mr. Spears, but all it would be the first year would be the 5. If at any later year it was the district's choice, they could do that to have Echo-Ride buy them. Otherwise, if the district did the master lease for all future purchases outside of these 5, that works perfectly well.
Okay.
I have one last question.
Yes,
Mr.
Ms. Riddell.
Spears. So, if for some reason the consumer price index for this industry declines, then are we able to come back and to renegotiate what this annual rate would be?
No, because it's a contract.
No,
So they're going. But yes, it's a good question,
Mr.
Ryan.
Excuse me, sorry, Ms. Riddell, was that the question to me or to Mr. Spears?
Yeah, it was to you.
Would you mind stating your question again so we'll make sure, Mr. Ryan?
So my question was, and right now you're using the consumer price index for this transportation industry. If there is a significant change or decrease in that indicator, would we then be able to come back to renegotiate what the annual rate is from the 2.75 or the 2.5%?
Yeah, I think it's the question would, or I guess the answer would be, is that from the amendment standpoint, those were the increased rates that were put in there, but it would be hedging then the Columbus school district for if there were also environments that the CPI was increasing greater than that 2.75%, like in 2015 when it was over 5.5%.
Thank you for the answer.
And thank you very much for answering the questions. Now, Board, we have before us the contract extension. It's, the will of the Board as to whether we want to table it and get more information or if we want to put it up for consideration. So, Board, what is the will of the Board?
I move we table it until I have a chance, I move we table it.
We have a motion.
Until the, what is the date of our meeting?
June the 5th
June
is
the
our
5th
review meeting. We have a motion to table. Do I have a second?
I'd like to make a substitute motion if I could.
Yes, Ms. Verdell.
Yeah, I move that we go ahead and approve the contract with the changes that we have, that we need to make, because we do know that this contract is over in June. And that leaves us with very little time to plan to make sure that we have everything taken care of so that kids can have buses on the first day of school. So that is my rationale behind going ahead and making the motion. And I also make the motion because we're using a consumer price index, which is a national measure, which we use national measures in other aspects of school district business in terms of student achievement, so forth and so on. So I feel comfortable with using that indicator. I wouldn't be as comfortable if it was something just specific to the state of Mississippi or to the Southeast. So that's my motion. And I can make the changes, the corrections to the contract if I need to, Mr. Dunn.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Dunn.
May I just ask you a question about your motion?
Yes.
On page 2/99, 2 of the amendment, but 99 of the materials.
Yes.
Under B, it appears the 5 route vehicles, it appears in that second line a couple of times, and then you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It appears again. That's
Right.
your amendment, those
Yes, sir.
two places?
Those 2 places.
From 5 to 10.
From 5 to 10.
For purchase by the district.
Correct.
Yes. That's my
Okay.
motion.
It has been motioned by Ms. Verdell. Is there a second to her substitute motion?
Second.
It's been seconded by Ms. Fisher. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. Any opposed? The motion does fail. Now we move to the next item on the agenda, which is the consideration to approve staff personnel items, which we have Dr. Hickman, I think you have mentioned to us, and it's at the back of our booklet for today.
Mr. Ryan.
Oh, Mr. Ryan? Mr. Ryan?
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for us?
Just not being president, what was the final vote?
The final vote, the motion did fail 2-2.
Okay. And is there a tiebreaker or anything, or I guess what, the 2-2 vote?
Mr. Dunn?
This just fails. In other words, there are 4 members present. When 2 vote for and 2 vote against, basically you've got, it fails.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we need to go back?
The-
Can you go back to the other motion?
Yeah. The question is being asked for the public to know. do you just automatically go back to the other and the answer is, I believe Robert's Rules of Order would say, yes, it falls back to the original motion because the substitute motion failed.
Right. And so since the substitution motion failed, the original motion was to table it to our June the 5th meeting so that we can get additional information and discussion about it.
But
which
there
is what
was,
the
was there a second to that
Um,
motion?
No, it wasn't second because the substitute motion was made.
Right, right.
But I mean, we can entertain a second now that the
You,
substitute motion
you
has failed,
can, you can,
so that we could take that up at the June 5th meeting.
yes.
So, Ms. Shoemake has made a motion to table this until the June 5th meeting to get other information we need to make our final decision. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? Third and final call.
Second.
It has been seconded by Ms. Fisher. Any discussion? And just to clarify for you, Ryan, I think that from me, and obviously any other board member can speak up about what they're asking, mine is that we get specific information back on the district, as you know, I mentioned in April, and of course you talked about some today, so that we have complete data. And then I go back to my point is, you know, what flexibility can be afforded to the district on the increases year over year, even if it's something to where you backload that to where we can find out some definition as to what the state's going to impose on us on a new formula and some other things, so that we can know what numbers we're working with as we get into, you know, the later years of this contract is what I'm asking. Board members, do you have anything else for Ryan?
May I ask a question?
Hold on just one second. Board members, do you have any other questions or requests for Ryan to kind of get to Dr. Hickman and anyone else he designates between now and our June the 5th meeting?
Yeah, actually I do. I just want to make sure, is it possible to get this information? I think that's all we're asking.
Yeah, I would say the information that we've been providing so far through all this has been as transparent as we can be. In terms of specific contract and essentially business expenses associated that go above and beyond, that's something that our executive leadership team will be deciding. I can say that we haven't had that request from any districts that we have partnered with. And we felt that the amendment proposed today was one where we continued to work alongside Columbus. So without any other representatives from my company, I cannot confirm that right now.
Okay. Thank you. And Ms. Velma, I just want to make sure that you realize on, or Dr. Hickman, about the June the 5th, that will be.
Is it June the 7th? You mean
It's
Wednesday?
Wednesday is June the 5th.
That's the 7th, am I correct?
Oh, June the 7th, excuse me, our review session. I thought it was the 5th. June the 7th.
That is correct. The meeting
Okay.
is set for 11, is it, what time is it
It's
on?
11:30.
11:30 a.m. on June the 7th.
Yes, that is correct.
And we're
And I apologize to you, Ryan, for the incorrect date. I thought it was the 5th, but it is June the 7th, Wednesday, June the 7th.
and we're asking them for their information on their profit margin.
No. What I'm asking is specific cost of this contract for what they've done for our district. They should have the cost quantified year over year as to this was the pay for all the buses, this was the maintenance cost. I know that's something, a number you've provided to us and different things. You know, we know what we've had to pay for out of our own by looking at the docket as to what we've been paying for the White Fleet, for gas, for other things. So basically what costs, they're trying to say, these are the costs that keep going up by servicing your contract in your district. They say they have to compete for drivers, and okay, well, we have to pay a higher wage. Well, you should be able to show an escalator every year where our costs for drivers are going up at this rate. I mean, those are the variables I'm asking for. I'm not asking for what their profit margin is. That's irrelevant information to me.
Yeah, and I would, okay.
You see, my question is more along the lines is that we've heard the cost of drivers, we have to compete because there's only a certain pool of people that we can pull from in your area to drive your buses. And so for us to maintain a good pool and for us to continue to provide good quality, this is what we're having to do. You're talking about insurance. Okay, well, what insurance are you referring to that you're having to pay on that? I mean, you should be able to provide those cost analysis is what I'd initially ask about as we go forward. And I'll get with Dr. Hickman, because just as I sent you those questions, I'd be glad to, put that together in a more formal way than just as you having to, write it down now. And obviously, any other board member, if you have other questions that you wish to submit for them to do, Dr. Hickman, would you be okay with receiving those and forwarding on as you did my email?
I will. I just want to ask a question, and believe me, Mr. Shannon has worked diligently and very hard on this and extra hours, so I do want to appreciate Mr. Shannon's end of it, and not saying that it's me. But just for EchoRide's sake, I want to make sure if we give them another, because they have provided a lot of information, if we give them another list of questions and they're able to provide answers to those questions, come June 7th or whatever, are we going to be satisfied with that, or are we going to ask another round? Like, is there any way that we can get an exhaustive list of questions so that they can answer, and we know that if we get these questions answered and the information is satisfactory to us, then they know that this is the final step and they're not in limbo again with their administration waiting on us to kind of ask more questions and figure it out.
My whole thing is I go back and I went back and I watched, because you can watch the meeting in the April meeting. I watched exactly what was asked. I'm not creating anything new. You can go back and watch it, and that's all I'm asking for is the information I asked for back in April. While we've gotten costs, Mr. Shannon has sent to us a Word doc, or put it in resources, a Word document that shows this is the cost for the different things. That's all, and I just restated what I asked back in April. So obviously we can take it up, and as you're asking, Dr. Hickman, we can take it up, and I still would like to see, I go back to the whole point is that, we're in limbo right now with cuts and different things, and I certainly believe that they want to work with us, but flexibility is flexibility, and everybody's different on it. So we have a motion on the table.
Would I
Yes.
please have the motion restated and make sure where the motion is and the second is?
Sure,
please.
okay.
And during the discussion, could
So-
Mr. Shannon answer one more question? or
Well,
ask
hold
one?
on, because the motion
Oh, I thought we were
was
I think it was the motion
The
really,
motion
it
was
it
June
meant to
5th.
be the 7th, and it was
Yes.
misstated as the 5th, I believe.
That's correct. So
Yeah,
to
that's
amend and may I just say the amendment to it, or does she need to restate it?
I think that
Just
her
gonna say-
intention was that next meeting,
Yeah.
so it's
Yes.
clear.
June
Okay, so the
7th.
motion is to move to table a decision on this to the June 7th meeting,
Review meeting.
review
yes.
meeting.
Okay.
That-
And then the second was Mrs. Fisher,
Is that right?
and we've,
I did, but,
But her intention was June 7th, so she's correcting that.
yeah. mhm.
and it was my fault that we said the 5th, because I had somehow had it in my mind it was the 5th when it's actually the 7th. And I apologize for that. And so, all in favor of the motion, please signify with your right hand. All opposed? So the item does fail. So the contract the extension has not been approved. Now Ryan, thank you very much
Can I
for your
have
call.
Mr. Shannon ask?
Well, you can do it after this, but we've got to move to our next item on the agenda.
Mr. Spears, if you could just confirm again what had happened. It's hard being on the phone with connection.
The motion to table it to our next coming meeting, which was on June the 7th, Wednesday, June the 7th, failed 2-2. And so that means that we didn't move it, so the contract was not extended.
Not the contract
Or
wasn't
the
extended. The table.
The table,
The
that's
matter was
correct.
not tabled
The
to
matter was
any
not
particular
tabled.
meeting,
That's correct. And so at this point, Ryan, I think we will be moving to our next item on the agenda, which is the
But
staff
I don't have
person.
clarity. I don't have clarity of what.
I don't have, yeah, I guess I'm then confused on
Okay,
clarity of once June 30th happens.
so basically, we're back where we started. We were going to table it, well, the initial motion was to table it to our next meeting, which was on June the 7th. It was incorrectly identified by me as the 5th, and we corrected that. It was motioned, and then we had a substitute motion by Ms. Verdell to approve the contract, and then it was seconded by Ms. Fisher, and it failed 2-2. So the proposal made to the board to do the extension, the 5 buses, those different things, that failed. And then we went back to our original motion, which was to table it, and it was motioned, and then it was seconded, but then it failed 2-2. And so therefore, we're basically back to our agenda, which is the next item, which is consideration of our staff personnel. So at this particular point, your contract is through June 30th of this year, unless the board were to take it back up at some point. So, so that's kind of, did that answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan, for calling in today, and Dr. Hickman, I'm sure, will be in touch with you after today's meeting.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
board, we go to item number 7, which is consideration to approve staff personnel. Dr. Hickman has brought to us some replacements as well as new hires. You can find it on page 103 of your booklet that was provided to us. I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Has been motioned by Ms. Verdell. Is there a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? Being no discussion, all in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. Now we move to our last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Board, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Has been moved by Ms. Verdell. Do I have a second? I'll make the second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify with your right hand. It is unanimous. We are adjourned.